Hola, it's Joe Parnavilla, and welcome back to another episode of Forbes Books Radio. Today, we're going to discuss mentorship. Mentoring is tapping into existing knowledge, skills, and experience and transferring those skills in order to advance the careers of other people. Joining me today is the president and CEO of the ACC, the Association of Corporate Counsel, and the author of the forthcoming book, Take 6. Her name is Veta Richardson. Hello, Veta.
Hi, Joe. How are you?
Good. And, I understand you have a super busy day job, but you said, listen, I got plenty of time now to write a book. So what inspired you with everything you have going on in your life to write a book? Because that's the one thing that fascinates me, especially people who have like real jobs. It's not like they can go summer in Tuscany and write a book and then come back and it's done. But you're doing it as you actually are living a career as a CEO of the ACC.
Yeah, Joe. So I'll tell you, writing a book is something that I toyed around with the idea for quite some time, for many years, but it was really born out of having all my professional life. I've always had people that I'm mentoring, even in the early days of my career. And so over like a 30-year career span, I'm always mentoring 3, 4, 5 people during the course of a year. So that's a lot of people.
So who are these people over the course of 30 years, several a year? Who are they?
Oftentimes it's students. I have a law degree. I don't practice law anymore, but I've been involved in bar association life for quite some time. So I'll meet students who have an interest in law or who are in law school and have an interest in certain areas of practice, and I'll start to mentor them. Also, young lawyers, once they get started in their career, they're plotting and planning on their next step. People who may find themselves in transition. They might lose their job or take a break and then want to come back into the profession. So it's a variety of different ways that I meet people. I'm fortunate to always have had jobs that were very public facing. And through that, I just meet a lot of people and have found that a lot of people have come to me seeking advice.
And I remember Oprah once said that a mentor is someone who allows you to see the hope inside yourself. Is that something, is that one of the reasons that you enjoy being a mentor? You give these people hope?
Yes, very much so. And it's also because I've been really fortunate, especially in the earlier days of my career, to work with amazing people who took an interest in me and took an interest in terms of giving advice and guidance and helping me find my way so I didn't have to stumble along. And so I realized what a difference it's made in my own life. So when people have come to me and wanted advice, I feel as though I always qualify it and let them know I'll give them the best that I can, but it isn't as if, I have a magic wand and am confident I know all the right answers. But I feel as though I can often ask questions that can help them find the right path for them.
We always hear about the effects that mentors have on people, but I guess the tricky part of it is finding that mentor. It's not like you can Google, find a mentor, find a mentor
Right.
near me. So, as in your case, how did you come across your mentors?
Well, through my role at ACC and a prior association where I was the CEO, I'm often asked to give speeches at different law schools or to law student groups. So if I give a talk about, career management and being a part of the profession and things that you should think about in terms of finding your path and professionally, I found students come up to me afterwards and then want to follow up. So I often give them my card. And for many students, they take your card and you never hear from them again. But then you'll have several who will follow up and want to make an appointment. And so I always try to say yes and give the student some of my time.
Tell us how this relationship blossoms, because like you mentioned, a lot of it is just people you've either just met at a conference or even in your work life. How does that relationship build and expand? Because one thing is for someone to be a father or a mother to be a mentor to a daughter or son, because there's like that built-in life shared experience. But when you're being mentored by a complete stranger, how does that dynamic work?
Yeah. Well, you have to take some time to get to know one another first. And one of the ways that I often like to get to know my mentee is to ask them about some of the things that they're involved with personally. I tend to be especially enthused when I meet people who are givers themselves, who tell me about things that they do as volunteers, whether it's volunteering to coach or volunteering to be a part of a community group or volunteering for a food kitchen or volunteering with their faith community. But I often find that when someone tells me a story about how they're a giver in other ways, I tend to bond a lot quicker with someone like that. But it's really about asking questions, getting to know them. If it's a student, why do they choose their school? Where are they from? What are some of their aspirations? Why did they choose this professional path? And then being forthcoming and giving and sharing my own journey too, and also being clear about the fact that my path wasn't just straight and easy. There were bumps in the road and mistakes that you make, and sharing really authentically like that is the best way to start to establish some sort of trust.
You know what's interesting about being a mentor too is the fact that you really have to sort of open up, and we live in a society where we're so closed off from each other. Do you find being a mentor fulfills something in you, the fact that you can open up to people and help people with your own experiences?
Definitely so. I think it's probably also because I don't have kids. But I have a lot of young people who have been around me all the time, and I think it's because of mentoring and feeling like that's a way to be nurturing, but nurturing of someone in the professional capacity.
Hmm. And we kind of joke about the millennial generation where they were brought up in everyone gets a trophy no matter what. As a mentor, how are you able to impart, sometimes hard and tough advice, but at the same time be as honest as possible? Because I think that's sort of a fine line, right? Because some people don't want to hear the raw, unvarnished truth all the time.
Yes, well, what's funny is that really brings us around to the topic of the book. It's called Take Six because I've found that there are six principles, if followed, help someone to figure out what their path should be. The first principle of the book, Take Six, is something called Take Stock. And take stock is being really honest with yourself and clear about what you're good at, what you might need to improve, where you are in terms of what you want to achieve. You may be at step one or step two. Ultimately, where is it that you're projecting that you want to be? And then you measure that gap, Joe. So it's like, I'm here at the start of my career, but ultimately I may envision myself, if we're talking about law, doing international law and commercial transactions and creating a life where perhaps I get an opportunity to live and work globally. So that's a big goal, right? To go from a student to ultimately that's your big dream. So it's about breaking down where you are, what are the skills that you might need that are going to get you to the spot you want to be. But then there are interim steps that you have to achieve. And take stock is just all about measuring the gap from where you are versus where you want to be and identifying the short and longer term strategies that'll move you in the direction towards that goal. That's all about taking stock.
Hmm. And how much of a time commitment should a mentor and even mentee expect to share in that dynamic of the relationship?
Yeah, I'll tell you that's kind of fluid. It depends upon the person's needs and goals. And also, frankly, it also depends on the mentor's schedule because there are times in my professional life that are just really, out of sorts and where I may not have as much time. So then you have to identify ways. It may not be that you have a phone call, but you may exchange a quick text, email correspondence to be able to keep in touch. But it's about checking in and at the conclusion of the conversation, like deciding when you might check in again.
Hmm. And it seems like we all have blind spots. There's certain things, as much as we want to be as woke as possible, we all have our own blind spots. Is that something you're able to help mentees with in terms of being on the lookout of stuff that's not clearly in front of them?
Yes, definitely. And it's also, at first when you're getting to know a mentee, you are not able because you don't know them as well to necessarily know what their blind spots may be. So it is about asking questions, encouraging them to probe, maybe referring them to some things that they ought to read that will help them identify what their areas are that they really need to work on.
One of the things I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes of a mentor is when it comes to handing out advice that has an element of risk to it. And since you have so much experience in this, is that one of the toughest parts of imparting any kind of wisdom or advice is the aspect of the risk? Because as much as you're able to share anecdotal stories of your life and have experience to back your answers, at the end of the day, it's the mentee that is taking all the risk, whether it's in their life or their career. Tell me about that for you.
Yeah, so certainly that's about the mentee and that person's own ownership of their career. So I always start off by saying, well, I can offer you advice, I can offer you perspectives, but ultimately the decision regarding what you do is entirely up to you. Here's an example. I had a mentee at one time in terms of where the mentee was in her career. She felt a little bit stuck, was really looking to move to a next level and didn't see a lot of opportunities, with the employer where she was. So we talked about what a next level position would be, who potential employers might be. And ultimately, it seemed as though the most opportunities for this person would require being open and willing to maybe make a career move, to move out of an area where, she grew up, where she went to school, where she had friends, family, and was comfortable, to take a job, in a different city. And so, we had conversations, and, in my opinion, I wanted to encourage her to consider that type of move because I thought it could be very broadening and an opportunity to grow.
And so, was it something where she was either pushing back or hesitant on, and you were sort of giving a little shove?
Yeah. So I said, if this is your goal, you may have to move. It may be that in your locality, you may not be able to identify this position. And so I would recommend, in order to identify it potentially quicker, to open up your search beyond your local metropolitan area. Ultimately, she was able to find a position, but I think not necessarily with as much responsibility as she might have had she been more open to conducting her job search a bit more broadly.
As a mentor, is there a aspect of trying to cut off some sort of emotional attachment so as you're not so involved in the person's life? Because to me, I think that's sort of the fine balance of being a mentor, because you want to be empathetic and show compassion, but at the same time, you almost have to have that coach teacher attitude as well. So talk to me about that sort of like line you have to sort of tiptoe across.
Well, you're very right. It is like a coach and a teacher. You're someone who serves as a sounding board and someone who can draw from a professional experience or even just life experiences that your mentee has not yet had an opportunity to experience. So you draw from that to be able to offer guidance. In mentoring someone, I don't dig down really, really deep into to cross the line into someone's home life or the like.
But it
So
comes up, I'm sure, right? Because
yeah,
yeah.
sure, it comes up, so you're generally aware, but that's not where you're inquisitive. The conversation is about the person in their professional context, which includes factors related to life, but it's not delving into their life trying to be their therapist or help someone manage their personal relationships. It's more as a professional mentor.
Okay. Could we talk about some of your success stories? I mean, like you mentioned, over 30 years and several year. Are there any that, I know it's hard to, it's like trying to say who's your favorite child, but are there any of them that stuck in your brain and you still remember to this day?
Yeah, well, I met this particular mentee when he was still in law school and applied for a scholarship with the organization that I was running at the time. And he ended up being selected for the scholarship program. And then among all the others that were selected too, he was just the type of person who was always following up to let you know where he was in terms of school and how it was going. And as part of the scholarship program, we also helped place the student for a work opportunity in the legal profession. And so this is a student who just would check in and say, hey, this is the area of law that I want to move in. This is what I'm thinking about my courses. What courses do you think I should take? So at one point, the advice was about how to navigate law school. Then it was how to navigate an internship. Then it was how to navigate a first job at a law firm. Then it was about how to navigate, I think I want to leave this law firm and go work as counsel to a corporation. How might I repackage my skill set to be attractive to do that? On up to my mentee just emailed me over the weekend to tell me that he got a great promotion. He's now counsel to Google and doing extremely well. That's really gratifying to know that I met him when he was just starting out in law school and have stayed in touch. Now I've also met his wife, who's a wonderful woman. They have a young baby now. And so it feels as though you've watched someone grow up, but been an important part of their professional development. And
Wow.
that's very gratifying.
What does that feel? I mean, gratifying is a great word, but what else does that feel like? Because it almost, like you mentioned, you don't have kids, but it almost sounds like he's your kid, you know?
Yeah, well, I guess so, because when I met him, he was just a kid.
Yeah.
And I have watched him grow up, and now he's a dad. That is an amazing relationship to be able to develop. I will also say sometimes you never know. So, why did I choose this story? You never know how sometimes the people you invest in might turn around and be really, really helpful to you. You don't do it for that reason. But my mentee at one point, the association where I work, wanted to have a keynote speaker, and we wanted to reach someone who was a really big deal at the mentee's company. And we decided that this person is such a big deal. His name was Laszlo Bach. He was the chief talent officer at Google. We wanted Laszlo to speak at an ACC annual conference. And we thought, oh, if we just send a letter, it's going to be one of 100. You know, I'm sure people ask all the time. So I hit upon, hey, I'm going to ask my mentee if he just drop off the letter to make sure like it doesn't end up in the trash. Maybe
Right.
the guy would actually get it and consider our request. And he did one better than that. He walked the letter to the guy's office and left it with his assistant. And lo and behold, we ended up hearing back from him that he accepted the invitation.
Wow.
Well, yeah.
That's so cool.
My mentee was happy to do it. He's like, "Well, you've helped me so much. Let me Of course I'll drop a letter off for you." That was a really beautiful story. You know, you mentor someone, you don't expect that you're going to get anything back in return other than the satisfaction of a really nice professional relationship. But
That's
that's one where he really did us a big favor.
that's great. And so, we're just over a very contentious political season. We have this pandemic. Is being a mentor any different now than it was, pre 2020?
Well, I'll say that because of the pandemic and the fact that all mentoring is virtual now, I'm not meeting with mentees face to face like we would, pre pandemic. Also, their worlds have shifted. If I stay on the topic of students, students are going to school by and large virtually now, so it's not the same sort of experience. People, I think, are a lot more hesitant to reach out because all of us are juggling with so many pressures, both family pressures, trying to keep safe, our own health pressures, as well as economic and job and professional. So everyone has a lot on their plate right now. So it causes some people to be reticent about reaching out. So I found with those that I have been mentoring, I like to just shoot a note, ask them how they're doing, and indicate to them, that's my attempt to indicate to them, hey, I haven't heard from you for a while. Hope you're okay. I want you to know that I'm receptive to hearing from you. If you need advice, as opposed to being silent. And sometimes people feel as though, oh, I'm sure she's busy. I'm going to try to avoid adding one more thing to the person's plate.
And lastly, Vita, it's a very short, simple question, but I'm sure a more complicated answer. You have a lot going on. You have a flourishing career. Why do you want to be a mentor?
Well, that's one of the principles of Take 6 too. It's called Take a Hand. And Take a Hand is really all about understanding how when you help others, ultimately you're helping yourself. When you go through the process of helping someone close their gap, in terms of where they are versus where they want to be and asking them the questions, when it comes time to think about your own career or your own objectives, I find that it helps me get to clarity a lot easier and a lot quicker. Because basically, you're developing like a muscle memory from your work with others that makes it easier to train that eye on yourself. Also, I believe that from mentoring people, it's also made me a better manager. At my current organization, we have a staff of about 80 people that ultimately report directly or indirectly up to me. And keeping that process of talking to people about their careers, to me, ultimately gives me a little bit more and makes me a better manager for the people who are part of the organization that I've been entrusted to lead.
Do you think being a mentor has made you a better human being, Vita?
Oh, definitely so. Definitely so. Well, I believe that there are books and articles about happiness that ultimately conclude that happiness is increased by giving and giving to others. It's not just about what you get, but it's really about what you give. To be able to sit back and feel a sense of you help someone else. Ultimately, I also think it by not being so self absorbed or self focused, but focusing instead on other people, maybe you don't sweat the small stuff as much.
Her name is Veta Richardson, the author of the forthcoming book, Take 6. Vita, thanks so much for the time, and thank you for everything you've done to help people in your community for the past 30 years, and hopefully another 30 more.
Oh, thank you, Joe. I look forward to it.
And that's a wrap on this episode of Forbes Books Radio, available for you to listen to and subscribe to on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, or wherever you get your podcasts. And please don't forget the golden rule and treat others as you want to be treated. Thanks for listening. Until next time, adios.
This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio. Find out more at ForbesBooksRadio.com.